Hey, you're listening to the Victims and Villains podcast, the official podcast of the Victims and Villains nonprofit, where we talk about mental health through pop culture. Now, my name is Captain Nostalgia, and on this episode, we are diving into some celebrity interviews that took place at Cosplay World in Richmond, Virginia on August 5th and 6th. Big shout out to Cosplay World, the organizers, the showrunners, everyone who made that show possible. It was a lot of fun. Thank you to everyone who supported us. Thank you to these four awesome individuals for taking time away from their con to sit down and talk to me about their careers and their mental health. On this episode, we are sitting down and talking with the Turbo Blue Ranger, Blake Foster, the Bronze Age Batgirl herself, Karen Whitfield, and two voice actors, Marc-Thompson and Tara Sands, who have too long of a resume for me to just kind of talk about in a brief introduction. So thank you again, and I hope you guys enjoyed this episode. These were a lot of fun to do interviews. Again, I had a blast. And if you guys are in the Richmond, Virginia area for 2024, stop at this convention. This was a really good time. So before we jump into the interviews, if you or someone you know is struggling with suicide, addiction, self-harm, or depression, in the show notes below, wherever you guys are currently listening or streaming this episode, you guys will find links to our mental health resource library. Without further ado, we hope you guys enjoyed this. If you or someone you know is listening to this podcast right now and you're struggling with suicide, addiction, self-harm, or depression, we encourage you guys to please reach out. This is the heartbeat of why we do what we do. Suicide is currently the 10th leading cause of death in the United States, and as of this recording, there are 132 suicides that take place each and every day on American soil. And when you scale back internationally, there are 800,000 successful suicides. That is one death roughly every 40 seconds. So if you or someone you know is struggling, you guys can go to victimsandvillains.net/hope. That resource is going to be right in the description wherever you guys are currently listening or streaming this. There you'll find resources that include the National Suicide Lifeline, which is 1-800-273-8255. You can also text HELP to 741-741. We also have a plethora of other resources, including churches, getting connected with counselors, LGBT resources like the Trevor Project, and also veteran hotline as well. Please, if you hear nothing else in this show, understand that you listening to this right now, have value and worth. We get it. Suicide, depression, mental health, these are hard topics, and the stigma around them doesn't make it any easier. But please consider the resources right in the descriptions below wherever you guys are listening, because once again, you have value and you have worth. So please stay with us. If you grew up in the 90s, chances are you were very envious of my next guest, Mr. Blake Foster. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm good. So I gotta ask, just starting off, man, like you were like living every kid's dream, stepping into an iconic franchise like the Power Rangers. What was that like?
It was huge for me because I was such a huge fan of Mighty Morphin Power Rangers. I'll never forget getting off the school bus with my sister when I was younger, running home to watch Mighty Morphin so I could play with the action figures while I was watching the show. And then to be able to be a part of such a huge franchise, like you said, and be blessed enough to be able to fill those shoes and step into that character, I was very, very blessed and very grateful.
So your character didn't doesn't start as like, wow, we're just going to introduce him now. We're going to build a movie, and he's just going to happen to be in it. Like, what's it like working on such a big production?
It was cool. For me as an actor, I was already doing a bunch of other things, so that wasn't my first movie or movie set that I was on. I thought it was pretty cool that I got introduced in Turbo, the Power Rangers movie, because I was just such a natural. My mom always prepared me really well for every role that I went out for. So stepping into that was just like my job. It was just something that I was doing, but I enjoyed it. so much more getting up and getting to set early because I got a chance to work with, those Rangers, the legendary Jason David Frank. May he rest in peace. But, I got to work with all the people that I grew up watching. And then in Turbo, it's pretty cool. I got to meet, like, Austin St. John. There was a bunch of deleted scenes that they never used, but we filmed together. Me, him, Amy, Bulk, and Skull. Like, I was with the Mighty Morphin people. So it was pretty neat, and it was definitely something that I enjoyed as a 12-year-old.
So is there like an equivalent of like Snyder Cut out there of the Turbo movie?
I'm sure that there was a bunch of deleted stuff. Any film that you film, any film that anybody films, they always have to cut it to make the time accordingly. But we had a bunch of deleted scenes that should have been in the film that was pretty cool that I enjoyed. But then again, I was just living the dream. I was literally working with people that I enjoyed, and I was doing it every single day. I'll never forget any other movie set that I would get on. We never had to get up really early. But Power Rangers, we started like at 7 a.m. every day. So I had to get up at like 5:30 because we didn't live too close to there. So we would have like a 45 to an hour drive every morning. But I would get up before my mom because I was so anxious just to get to set and see Jason Frank and Johnny Young Bosch and stuff. So yeah, it was definitely an experience that I cherished, and I loved every single bit of it. And now look, we're here 30 years later. We're doing, the show's still going. We're doing traveling, and we're doing Comic-Cons, getting to meet the fans, and I get to express how I was a huge fan, and I know how they relate, and it's simple for me to be able to be like, yo, don't feel uncomfortable when you come up and talk to me, because I'm just a normal person. But at the same time, yeah, I was a Power Ranger. That's pretty freaking cool.
So I got to tell you, like, aside from like Power Rangers, you were a part of another childhood classic for me, and it was Casper Meets Wendy. Casper also being another like iconic, groundbreaking property of the mid 90s. Was like kind of working on like something again like iconic like that. You also did Brady Bunch too, so you just working on a bunch of like iconic stuff.
Yeah, I mean, at the time I was just acting. I was doing one movie to the next show to the next TV show, so it was just normal for me. But in Casper Meets Wendy, it was pretty cool because I got to work. Okay, so Mad TV back in the day. Remember Stewart? Look what I could do. So in Casper, he's in that. So I got to meet him, and I was pretty stoked on meeting him. And then obviously working with Hilary Duff, Lizzie McGuire and things like that. So she's a good friend of mine, and we still talk. And it was just something that I was doing at the time because I was acting. I literally went from Power Rangers Turbo to Casper Meets Wendy. So one film to the next film. And before that, I was doing an independent film. That's how I got the role of the Power Rangers, because the director of that film was Shuki Levy, which is the producer of Power Rangers. So when it came about for me to be a Power Ranger, there was no audition process like all my other acting jobs that I did. They literally created that role around my martial arts. I was just messing around being a 12-year-old kid on set one day, throwing kicks, doing backflips and stuff like that. And then he was like, wow, you're really good at that. And I think it clicked in his head. Why don't we have him as a Power Ranger? It'll relate to kids. So that's how it happened. He said, you want to be a Power Ranger? I didn't believe him. I was like, you're joking. You don't know nothing about Power Rangers. And the next thing I knew, I was at a table reading with all the Power Rangers.
I gotta ask, because I'm such a huge fan of independent cinema, what is the title of that movie?
The working title was called Rusty: A Dog's Tale. It ended up being Rusty to the Great Rescue. It was about talking animals, and I worked with Roger Rabbit, actually, Charles Fleischer. Yeah, he was in that independent film. Yeah, Rue McCallaghan, forgot the other guy's name. But yeah, it was an independent film, and that's how it happened. I was just at the right place at the right time, and that's how it happened for Power Rangers. Then I went from that movie, Rusty: A Great Rescue, to straight filming Power Rangers Turbo, the movie.
So, obviously, when you're dealing with something as iconic as Power Rangers, I feel like you have, like, two sets of fans where you have, like, the casual fans that, like, they grew up on it, they stopped watching at a certain point, then you have, like, the diehard fans that have, like, continuously watched every iteration of those characters, and it's just been, Power Rangers has always kind of been something that has been a positive impact for their mental health.
Right.
And what is it like to be as a part of a legacy that has been able to have such a positive impact on so many people?
Well, for me, Power Rangers, what it was, that Zordon era. Alpha, the communicators, Zordon, things like that. That's what intrigued me to it. But more than that, it was the message that they sent to the kids. It was being, responsible and being a ranger. Not everybody could be a Power Ranger. You had to have a certain checklist that you had to complete. It was just for me. It was just I enjoyed it so much because I'm a martial artist, and I got to go to set every single day. I got to put on my costume. I got to do karate, and I sent the message to all the kids that anybody could be a Power Ranger if you put your mind to it. So the mental aspect on it, as a 12-year-old, I wasn't really thinking much because I was living the dream. I was, I was working every single day with these guys, and I was enjoying it. It wasn't something it wasn't a job for me at the time, But I tell everybody the same thing, to be a Turbo Ranger is not an easy task. You must work hard and stay in class. Say no to drugs and yes to school, and you can grow up to be a Ranger too. Shifting into Turbo.
Now, I'll cut this out if you don't want me to talk about it. But I know some celebrities are weird about bringing up other celebrities that they've worked with, and but obviously last year we lost Jason David Frank, unfortunately, to his own mental health battle. And I'm just as someone that grew up with him, it looks like you guys remained close throughout the kind of years. How important is it for people to understand the gravity of understanding the signs and of mental health?
Yeah, I think that me and him were really close, and it devastated not just individuals but the whole community, the whole franchise. Everybody got hit really hard with it. But that's why I'm so keen on always telling people look, you got to talk to your loved ones. You got to let people know that you love them. We're not promised tomorrow. You never know what somebody's struggling with. So the best thing to do is obviously to talk about it, to try to get help. And I think for Jay, he was doing that. He was trying to give messages to people, and that's why he did the whole poems and the mask thing. Because at first, I thought it was him talking to people about how they feel with their, mental awareness. But it was really his demons that he was talking about and stuff that he was struggling with deep down inside. So I would just say talk to people. Find someone that you can open up to. A lot of us celebrities are always going to listen, and if they message us and something like that, I always see it, and I always try to give them my best advice on how to stay grounded as an individual. For example, if I ever fall off track of doing something, I always go back to my roots, and my roots is martial arts, and that always leads the path for me to be able to find what I really want in life or what I really want to accomplish. So the best thing to do is just reach out, and if you know someone's going through that, be a lending ear. Give them a hug. Be someone that they feel that they can open up to, because like I said, we didn't know Jay was struggling with this stuff. None of us did. He put on such a good face when he was at Comic Cons, and the way that he handled people and the way that he talked to people. So it really kind of shocked everybody, because we didn't know that he was really struggling with those things. And if I would always message him, we talked all the time. I would text him all the time. And I would always say, yo, let's go grab some sushi. Let's go ride our Harleys if you're in L.A. So I was always trying to be that friend for him, like that little brother that I was when I was filming with him on set. So, yeah, my best advice is for mental awareness and suicide prevention and stuff like that. If you feel like you're doing anything that's not normal in life, talk to somebody. Open up. Tell somebody that what you're going through, because that'll help open up doors to be able to help prevent that stuff.
Yeah, I was really taken back last year with the news. Because like I said, I grew up on you guys.
Yeah.
I grew up on Turbo. I grew up on Zeo. I grew up on, obviously, Mighty Morphin. And, just to kind of, hear that, it was a kind of a shock to, also those close. It really does emphasize the fact of, being vulnerable, being transparent, and just, like you said, sometimes listening to someone is, the least you can do, and is going to be the most impactful sometimes.
Yeah. I just think that that's the best thing to do, because as a martial artist, I talk to all the students, and I talk to all the kids, and I talk to all the parents, and I talk to all the adults, and when I do Comic Cons, I'm always talking to people to kind of feel them out or where they're at. And Jay, he was kind of towards the end, he would start being very confined on what he would do, and he wouldn't really open up as much. But I know that he's in a better place. I know he's not struggling with his demons anymore. And I know he's with his mom. I know he's with his brother. You know, it's crazy. His brother did the same thing. So it kind of falls into a pattern of like, is that something that they just all struggle with, you know? And it might be something that's genetics, or it might be something that's passed down, or you never know. So the best thing to do is talk about it, open up. There's plenty of things that you could do nowadays, and there's plenty of people that you could reach out to. So I know he's watching over us. I feel him with me all the time, especially at the Comic Cons. I feel like he's poking me or something right now. But we love him, we miss him, and I'll see him one day when I pass over when I go, it's my time to go, I'll see him. I know I will.
Yeah, and I just want to emphasize, like, the resources, click the links in the show notes below where you guys can find the resources. We have a whole plethora of them, but where can people find you online and follow what you're up to next?
Yeah, I mean, I'm pretty active on social media, TikTok and Instagram, Blake A. Foster. I don't really do anything other than Instagram. I'm pretty focused on Instagram. It's one of my biggest platforms that I have. So, yeah, follow me on at Instagram at Blake A. Foster.
All right, Blake. Well, I thank you for reminiscing, talking about some mental health with me. It was a pleasure.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, man. I appreciate it.
Fans of Batman 66 might recognize this next name. She is the Bronze Age Batgirl, Miss Karen-Whitfield. How are you doing?
Hi, everybody. Hope you're doing great today, and I'm doing fantastic. It's nice to be invited to your show today.
Well, thank you so much for that, Miss Whitfield. I want to jump in just kind of talking about your book. You wrote a retrospective called Bat-Driven. Can you kind of tell us a little bit about that?
Yes. It's Bat-Driven-West because I am from Durham, North Carolina, and I met Burt Ward in 1977, and I was hired soon after that by DC Comics and moved to Los Angeles, and I traveled with Adam West, Batman, and Burt Ward, Robin, for 5 years, and all over the country, and I was donned the bronze-age-batgirl mantle because Yvonne Craig was in the show, and 10 years after the show had ended in 1978, they were traveling as Batman and Robin when I met them, so they'd been out there a few years before, and they wanted a Batgirl, and Yvonne had hung up her cape, and so DC hired me to travel with them, so I was the only Batgirl that suited up and traveled with them for those years, from 1978 to 1985. And it was such a wonderful journey, and I am who I am today because of Adam West and Burt Ward and Batman and Robin.
Was it intimidating stepping into the cape and cowl of such an iconic character?
Well, that's a great question. I never thought about it. I watched Yvonne Craig as Batgirl when I was 10 years old, and she made me feel stronger and taller and empowered. And I just felt like when I was with them and when they became Adam West to Batman and Burt Ward to Robin, when I put on that cowl and cape, I felt the same thing. I felt empowered as they did, and they took it very seriously, and they said, if you're going to wear the cape, then you need to be the part, you need to be Batgirl. And I never thought about it, I just did it, and it just was my path. I think watching her and then taking the mantle, I was the second one right next to her, and it just came natural to me, actually.
So I don't want to spoil too much about the book, but what was like a day-to-day like with when you guys were, for the 5 years you guys were on the road together?
Yeah, so the promoters that had us, we didn't have Comic-Cons back then that we attended. We had car shows, opening of stores, opening of malls, because it was back in the late 70s and early and mid 80s. And we just had fundraisers, and they would pick us up. We'd have breakfast, and then we'd get to the location, and we would suit up and we would put live performances on in front of everyone that was there. And we had so many people because it was only 10 years after the show had ended. And we were the only ones dressed up, not like today. You have a lot of cosplayers that's dressed, but we were the only ones, so we clearly stood out. And it just was just wonderful. We would sign autographs for, 5 to 6 hours for the full day, and it was just a fun, fantastic journey.
That's awesome. And one of the things that I've recently done personally is kind of dug into a little bit more the history of how promotion was different back in those days than it is now. With social media has got to change the name of the game. But you guys were actually out here, bringing Batman, Robin, Batgirl to I would imagine what kind of platforms were you guys doing, because you said it wasn't you guys didn't have Comic-Con, so was it mall appearances, schools, libraries? Can you kind of talk about the different platforms you guys were invited to?
Well, we didn't have emails. We didn't have social medias. We didn't even have answering machines. So we didn't have anything like that, or cameras. We didn't have many cameras either. That's why, it's taken me some time to find pictures of people. And now that I'm out, after 35 years of hanging up my cape, because I did move back home to North Carolina after being with them for the 5 years, we just, I believe that we did have a manager, and Bert worked very closely with the manager, and he would find locations for us to go to. They would invite us, like I said, at I don't remember doing schools. That would have been a great idea. Even hospitals would have been a great idea, but I wasn't a part of that. If they did do that, we just did the opening of malls, stores, fundraisers, and I believe the manager actually would reach out to people, because we did not have any kind of social media platform at all back then.
Yeah, that's awesome. So what's it been like, now that Bat-Driven-West has been out for, a year or two at this point? What's it been like to kind of what was the writing process like for you?
I'm sorry, what did you say? Can you repeat that? Could you repeat that? I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, you're fine.
It's loud in here.
What was the writing process like, kind of digging into some of this nostalgia for you, writing the book?
Oh, great question. Well, actually, I never thought I would actually come back out. I never thought I would even write a book. But I went back out to visit the Batman family in 2016, and it was actually the rebirth of DC from New York to Burbank. And we had lost Yvonne in 2015, and that really sparked a place in my heart when that happened. Then when I went out to visit the Ward family and the Bat family in 2016, just to see them because it had been so long, I went out 4 times that year. And on the way back, I decided to look into my treasure box of all my Batgirl things, and I decided at that point maybe I should write a journey of what happened, in which it was the 50th anniversary of Batgirl in 2017 when I started it, and it was all just serendipity because I did not realize the times of all that at the time, and it took me 2.5 years to write it, and in 2019 I finished it, and just to reach back into my heart of things that we went through and all that happened. It was not easy, but it was great that I was able to do it, and I was happy that I did do this. And now I'm out in the Comic-Cons, and I've done 52 between Comic-Cons and comic stores and bookstores since June of 2021, and I'm so happy to be back, and it's definitely different. It's so surreal to see all the cosplay and everything that I've seen, and all the fans have accepted me back, and I am with DC Comics again, and I have a contract with them.
That's awesome. I didn't know about that latter part. That's really cool. Congratulations.
Yeah, thank you so much. I appreciate that. It's my family, so I'm glad to be home.
Well, our publication talks specifically about using pop culture to talk about mental health, and you brought up losing Yvonne earlier, right around the time that you guys got to start reconnecting with some of the cast members. How does something like that tragedy kind of spark positivity for your journey as Batgirl and kind of the now author you are?
Yeah. Well, like I said, it was really difficult when I found that out, but then I felt like maybe it's my time or my place to step up and even be out there in her honor, since I was a little girl and I watched her, and a lot of people didn't know there was another Batgirl, so I feel like I'm in that legacy right behind her, and I can remind people of who she was. She was the trailblazer of all of us Batgirls, right? And all, that we do have, even the cosplay Batgirls. And then we lost Adam in June of 2017, and right after I connected back to him, and that was very, very difficult. And I believe now that I'm out reminding people of who they were as people in and out of their superhero roles, that hopefully within time, everybody will always remember them. And I'm trying to remind them of their legacy. I mean, if it wasn't for them blazing the trail, we may not be here today as we are.
Well spoken, well spoken. So I don't know, like I'm kind of curious, like as a journalist, are you able to talk about what the projects you're working with DC?
Well, right now, no. I'm visiting all the Comic Cons that would actually invite me to them, and then I do reach out to them, and comic stores, and I can't really talk about projects yet, other than I am on my second edition of my book. I am writing another one because people have found me since I'm out when they were like 9, 10. They were in their 7, 8, 9, 10, and they have pictures of me, and now they're mailing those pictures to me, and I'm keeping a copy, and I'm putting them in my second edition, where before it was hard to find them. And also, I'm writing a second edition of my book, and I'm adding what happened after the book, at the end, where I went into the Comic Cons and people that have affected my life, and this journey again with being out on the second part of the journey of being the bronze-age-batgirl.
So now that you've lived in the shoes of the character, and there is like this relationship with DC, do you have any hopes of potentially one day actually writing the character in comic books?
Yes, I would like that. She has been very well written by DC, and I'm very proud of where she was, where she is, and where she's going to be going. I'm really proud of their writing. I would like to write maybe a comic book of my life as stepping into the Batgirl role as my book. A lot of people don't read books, so a lot of people ask, do I have my own comic book? And I really would like to do that.
That sounds intriguing to me. Like, I think that your journey, especially like given how it's tied to the Bat family, is such a fascinating piece of history, and there's so much that we can learn about, like, about the aftermath. Because I feel like most people, like, it was Batman 66, it was kind of campy, we didn't hear anything about it for a while, and then boom, you had Burton's Batman, and it was like Batmania kind of swept over all again. But you kind of are really the bridge between both of those iterations of the character.
That is so true. Thank you for saying that, because I never looked at it in that light, but you're absolutely right. I was able to live it with Adam and Bert as Batman and Robin, and then going into the years with Michael Keaton, and I've seen all of those Batman movies as well. And we were really looking forward to our Batgirl movie coming out this past December, and I felt like I was an ambassador to that, telling everybody about it, and it didn't happen. So eventually I hope that we do have our own Batgirl movie as well. But thank you for bringing that to my attention, that I am like the bridge of that, right? That's pretty cool.
Yeah, they're two completely different tonal, like, eras, but, like, that's the fascinating thing about comics, is that comics are a reflection of their times, whether they choose to be or not. And so, like, when you look at, like, the comics and the stories that are being told around the 66 era of Batman, it's these very heavily sci-fi, kind of campy, lighter toned, and then you get into like the dark ages of the more modern age, I guess is what it's considered, of like, Frank Miller and Tim Burton. So, of course.
Absolutely. like in the 60s when they were in 1966 to 68, it was much a lighter time of our life. It was happy, colorful, lighter times. And then moving forward to 1989 when, like you said, the Batman with Michael Keaton, it became a little bit darker, but it was still fun. Jack Nicholson and all of them that did what they did. It was a lot of fun that they did, and then it became darker and darker as it moved forward. But that's like our life, our time. And DC is really good about taking our era, taking the time of our world, to use it in the comics. And I think they do a really good job of that. And they also show people, hidden in there, like when you have villains, how to react to villains, and then like the Joker, the different Jokers, the Joaquin, they tapped into the mental illness with that. And even Batgirl, when she was shot by the Joker in 1989, she became Oracle. They took that disability and turned it into another empowering way of being a computer hacker, the brilliant mind of helping the criminals into the computer hacking. I just like the way DC, they do turn stories to show us how things are.
Absolutely. And so, Karen, thank you so much for your time. Where can people find you guys online?
My Instagram is Live Like Batgirl, and my Facebook is Karen-Whitfield-Batdriven-West.
That's awesome. I love that handle for Instagram there. Thank you so much for your time, and keep it classy.
Thank you again, and everyone have a great day and take good care.
How would you guys like to help us get mental health resources into schools, conventions, and other events? Well, now you can. Simply go to patreon.com/victims and villains for as little as $1 a month. You guys can help us get mental health resources into current and upcoming generations, educate and break down stigma surrounding mental health, suicide, and depression. And you get exclusive content that you can't get anywhere else. And you guys can tell us which Nicolas Cage movie you want us to cover, and we'll do it. All it takes to get started is to go to patreon.com/victims and villains, or simply click the link in the episode description wherever you guys are currently listening or streaming this episode. Pick your tier and get started today. Yes, it's that simple. So quickly select the tier that you want and help us get hope into the hands of the depressed and the suicidal today. All right, I'm here with another voice of many childhoods, Mr. Marc-Thompson. How are you doing today?
Hey, I'm doing great. How are you?
I am well. You have quite a prolific career in terms of animation. You've kind of touched on a lot of pop culture touchstones, from Casey Jones and Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, Pokemon, Yu-Gi-Oh. What's it like stepping into like all of these iconic characters?
It's pretty wild. Like some of them, I just feel very blessed to get to do, because some of them are properties that I grew up on. So like Ninja Turtles, I watched the original one. So then I do Casey Jones on the 2003 one. So that was like a really big deal for me. And I'm a big Star Wars fan, and I get to do a bunch of the Star Wars audiobooks. So that's huge. And then like for Pokemon and Yu-Gi-Oh, I didn't really grow up on those or wasn't so much of a fan of those, but getting to see how much it means to other people is pretty significant to me and has come to be pretty special to me. And I really didn't realize that until like a year or a few years ago, because I started doing conventions more recently, and to get to meet people that have like grown up on it, or it's a special part of their lives, has become very important to me and very fulfilling. So it's really cool.
So on that note, I want to tell you thank you for being a part of my childhood, because as I mentioned yesterday, like when I introduced myself, like I love Daria. Daria is one of my all-time favorite shows of all time. So like to be here with like, the voice of Mr. DiLaurento and Kevin and Mr. O'Neill, like that's so cool. Like also like I loved like Casey Jones and that version of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. So it's really cool because like Daria got me through some like strange times in my life. So like the ability to like just laugh and like feels kind of surreal standing next to you right now. So just gonna be honest.
Oh, I love that. Thank you for telling me that. That means a lot to me. Yeah. Yeah, that show is pretty special. Like, I feel like it was really ahead of its time. And I remember one time I was on a subway while we were, like, in the middle of seasons or something, and they had given us a cast watch that had Daria on the face of the watch. And I was just on the subway, and I had my arm up, and this guy in this really nice suit was like, "Is that Daria?" And I was like, yeah. And I was, like, shocked that he knew what it was. And then he started chatting about Daria, and I feel like that show reaches a really broad palette of people and really spoke to a lot of different experiences that people had, and really, really proud to have been on that show. It was my first ever job, actually, so it was really cool.
That's awesome. Like, just to kind of, start with something like groundbreaking like Daria, and then to kind of like move over to like other things, like Star Wars is a great example. That is, what's it been like to be a part of something, a canon of something as like impactful as Star Wars?
I mean, that's like a dream come true, like answered prayer for me. Like, I feel so honored to get to do that, and I feel kind of like a microscopic, midichlorian level influence, but it's an influence nonetheless, and I the fact that people seem to like what we do on those books is really important to me. Like, I have a friend who teases me because I've gotten to do a lot of different things. I've been on like Broadway and things like that, but on my resume, the first thing is Star Wars audiobooks, and he's like, dude, people care much more about this thing than that thing. I was like, yeah, but it's Star Wars. Like, you don't understand. So it's a huge deal to me.
So you mentioned Daria being your first, job as a voiceover actor. Yeah. How did you kind of get into the art of voiceover?
So, I guess the short story is I went to school for acting, and then my sophomore year there was a posting on a bulletin board for an audition for MTV, and it was in the old days before the internet. And we had to like call in, and it was literally like you leave a voicemail on an answering machine, and I did that, and I left a goofy voice on there, and that was enough for them to call me in for a callback, and I ended up getting Daria. But I think the longer version is like I had really supportive teachers in high school that got me involved in like the school plays and the choirs, and kind of really their support and encouragement helped me think maybe I could do this, and my mom was pretty pivotal in that. Like, she noticed early on that I really enjoyed performing, and so she went way out of her way to get me signed up for voice lessons and improv classes and acting, and would kind of shuttle me to everything, and really, and it kind of helped. Even when it came to go to college, I was kind of feeling like, well, maybe I should study something more realistic, and and she was like, if you really want to do this, you should really go for it, and I'll be eternally grateful to her for that, because I don't know if I would have had the courage if not for her doing that.
Well, that kind of like leads into like what separates our publication from other publications is the fact that we use pop culture as a means to kind of have conversations about mental health. And, some of the listeners right now, or, some of the people that have been fans of the podcast for a while might not necessarily have that type of like support system that's in place for them. And so like my question for you is like, without that, like, can you speak to like, or I guess like leave encouragement for like those that might not necessarily have those structures put into place?
Yeah. Well, I think one common theme that I see in a lot of the shows I've worked on, and a lot of pop culture, whether it's Star Wars or, Yu-Gi-Oh! Or Ninja Turtles, is this idea of like found family, and that like, some of us might not have the support system within our biological family, but there are communities out there that, you can find along the way on your journey, and on your through your obstacles and through your challenges, you tend to find like-minded people. And if you can find those community, like find your tribe, or find the people out there that you connect with, or that have that common goal that you have, you can find a lot of encouragement and a lot of support from that. And I also think just, I don't know if I'm jumping ahead or not, but like, what I love about Star Wars and all these shows is that, all of these characters face really tough challenges and really intense obstacles. And, we're kind of spoiled because we get to see them overcome those obstacles in an hour or 2 hour movie or a half-hour episode. But, in life, sometimes you don't see the resolution to those obstacles until 10, 20, sometimes 30 years later, So, but they all have that message of if you work through it, eventually you can overcome those challenges. And eventually, if you don't give up, if you keep persevering, and not every day will be a victory, not every moment will be a victory, but over the course of time, the long arc, there will be victories. There will be bright spots to look forward to. But you can't give up. You gotta keep fighting. So.
Yeah, one of the things that we've been talking recently a lot in our content has been the importance of pain. Like, it sucks, but to kind of go through it, it is really a rewarding experience to kind of understand and like kind of make it through the end of that. And I think, like, we brought up Star Wars. That's like a great example because we get to spend a multitude of media watching Luke Skywalker go through that exact thing.
Yeah, and I think one of the interesting life lessons, as a Star Wars fan, that I've kind of taken recently is the idea that the battle for good or evil or the struggle of life doesn't end. You know what I mean? Like, it's like going back. Like, I know people have different opinions about the sequel movies and stuff like that, but as an older guy, I was really fascinated by the idea that Luke, for a big chunk of time, was considering giving up. And like, I did all these things, and then the First Order came back, and all these awful things happened. So what was the point? And Yoda has to remind him that failure is the greatest teacher. And that you have to pass on what you've learned. And like, even though you have the victory at the end of Return of the Jedi, there's evil will come back and hard times will come back, and you got to get back up and you got to try again, and you got to pass on the things that you've learned in your struggle to people that are behind you that are going through their struggle, and that's just part of life, is that that struggle is always going to be there, but you still it's worth fighting. It's worth trying it, and if you give up, it's much worse than if you keep fighting and keep trying. You might have those setbacks, but you got to keep going. So,
absolutely. And one of the things that I'm kind of curious about when it comes to voice acting is the mental health journey, kind of getting into these characters. Like, I know you shared about like how you got Daria and kind of like the goofy, silly side of it, but like diving into even some of the like Pokemon or like the Casey Jones. Like, can you kind of talk about like finding that character and like breaking into the mental health or the psychosis of that individual?
Yeah, I think if I'm totally honest, I probably should do a little more thought into that, but I don't always do as much in-depth thought when it comes to some of those moments. But I do, like, I was kind of trained in a acting method that's about being in the moment and kind of responding to things. So I think I definitely will tap into, in the moment, what is motivating these characters, or how distraught they might feel, or how angry they might feel, or how hurt they might feel, and so a lot of that for me comes from, if I'm dubbing, it comes from the art and kind of seeing the expressions on their faces or the situations, but also you tap into personal experiences and you think about times where you've been frustrated or hurt or abandoned, and you definitely kind of tap into those feelings and try to funnel them into some of those moments. So
you've tapped into a bunch of characters in the last 30 years. Can you kind of talk about how voice acting has affected your own mental health and kind of the ability to escape into these characters?
Wow, that's a great question. Well, I think as you explore different emotions and try to perform different emotions for different characters, it inevitably brings up stuff in yourself, and there are, I think there's been times where I've been in the booth, and in the process of trying to, I'm thinking specifically of a time where there was a character that they loved died, and in the act of performing that helped me work through some of the emotions I was feeling with, like my mom passing away, or just kind of complex emotions of learning how to accept that this hard thing is happening, and I don't like this hard thing. I don't want this hard thing to be happening, but I have to. I'm going to learn to accept it and kind of exist with it, and not just let the sadness of it completely envelop and overwhelm me. And it's so there's been in having to explore that for other characters. It kind of in a weird way is kind of cathartic or therapeutic for me in some ways, which I hope doesn't sound too actory or weird, but like I found that to be true in my case, and I know for me, like when as a fan, when I watch things, it helps to feel not alone, because like when you see someone else experiencing something and you feel like, hey, I've felt that too, or what they're feeling, all of a sudden I'm welling up with emotion because I feel what they feel. It makes you feel less isolated. It makes you feel like, okay, I'm not out of my mind. You like the fact that they relate to that and are dealing with that makes me feel less alone. And if they're going to get through it, maybe I can get through it too.
We brought up the importance of just how impactful something like animation can be on one's mental health, and there's this still this kind of myth that cartoons are for kids or kind of stuff like that. But I think that especially with something special like Turtles Forever, definitely kind of exploring this mental health journey and it takes itself seriously.
Yeah.
And so, to people that might still have this notion or this idea that cartoons are for kids, I think you're living proof, and a lot of the people here that you're talking to are basically saying, no, this isn't true. It's gotten me through hard times.
Yeah. No, I agree. It's just a different medium. It's all storytelling. It's all, so whether that's, film or television or the written word or whatever, it's just a different way of expressing the human experience. So and sometimes, again, you could express the human experience just through broad, over-the-top comedy, and sometimes it's through adventure, sometimes it's through romance, and but it all is tapping into things that we're all going through, and whatever you connect with and whatever medium that is, I think it's all useful and beneficial and inspiring, and can help us empathize and understand different perspectives that maybe we're not close to in our personal lives, but when we see other characters go through them, it can help us understand things in a deeper way. So I love it. I'm a big animation fan. There's plenty of cartoons that I've connected with, personally, that it didn't. In some ways, it deepened the connection, because you almost let your guard down a little bit. It's oh, it's just a cartoon, So, because in some ways you don't expect it as much, so it kind of sneaks in the back door and kind of gets you off surprise. Get you when your guard's down. So it's kind of cool.
For sure. I think some of my favorite television shows remain cartoons. If I need to veg or something like that, it's cartoons like Simpsons, South Park, Daria. That just have a small rotation of things that I do. So
yeah.
But where can people find you online, Mr. Thompson?
So I am Captain Ehud _VO _ Marc Thompson. But if you do Captain Ehud or Marc Thompson, you'll find me. But I'm on Instagram and Facebook, and I don't know what Twitter is now, but I'm on Twitter and so different things like that. So.
All All right, well, thank you so much for your time. Thank you for talking about animation and mental health and just kind of the relationship between the two.
Thank you. I love what you're doing. I think that's such a cool concept, and I hope this helps some people, so it's really cool.
Absolutely. If you are a fan of anime, then chances are you have probably heard the amazing voice actress standing right to the right of me right now, Miss Tara Sands. How are you doing this morning?
I always want that introduction. I'm doing great. How are you?
I always try to outdo every kind of introduction that of everybody else that I could do. So I'm just gonna be real. Anime is a world that's kind of foreign to me. So I'm that's typically where a lot of your credits lie. Can you kind of talk about before we get into anime, how did you get into voice acting?
So I was I grew up near New York City, and I was, as a teenager, auditioning for whatever I could. I just wanted to be an actor. I was auditioning for theater and TV and commercials, and voiceovers were another part of what you did as an actor, what I still do as an actor. So it was just another acting job, and I was like, great, I'd love to audition for voiceovers. I was doing voiceovers for radio commercials, audiobooks. The anime stuff came a little bit later, but my very first anime job was Pokemon. So how lucky am I?
Yeah, Pokemon was one of those animes that kind of took the entire world by storm. It kind of it was just a phenomenon that very similar to the Spice Girls, just kind of caused it just kind of caused culture to stop. What characters do you play on that, and then kind of what was it like just stepping into that phenomenon?
So I was part of the first 8 seasons of Pokemon, so I started when we didn't know it was going to be a big deal. So some of the first early characters I played were Bulbasaur, Oddish, Jasmine, Tori. Some of those are from the movies. Richie was a big one that people liked. I really loved that character, so I really liked Richie. And in recent years, I was able to go back to the show, and I play Yamper and Chloe's Rotom phone. So it's crazy. When I first started, I did not know it was going to be a big deal. We knew it was a big deal in Japan, but that didn't always mean that it was going to translate to the States. So when I first worked on it, I thought it was just some weird show. And I remember thinking, oh, I might never see these people again. And now it's 25 years later, and we're still talking about Pokemon. So I should never be a development executive because I don't know it's going to be popular. But no, now I love it. Now that I understand it, and obviously when we're dubbing it, we don't see a full episode. I was just seeing my bits and pieces. So obviously, as a full show, it's great. When you're only there doing your lines and all you're saying is Bulbasaur, you're like, what is this weird show?
So you're more recently, you've gotten into some other pretty acclaimed anime with Hunter x Hunter and Seven Deadly Sins. What is it like to work on, continuing that, juggernaut shows, just adding those to your repertoire?
It's more about the characters for me. So again, I can see if the shows are big or not, but for me, it's all about ooh, who do I get to play? And doing, we didn't used to have these wikis about every show where I could look up and read lots of detail about the characters, because I don't necessarily read the manga before, but I do because I don't want too many spoilers. I like to be surprised in the booth, but I do like some character descriptions, because maybe I don't know that they have a sweet side that was revealed later, but so you kind of want to play that underneath the tough side or whatever it is. So now it's just a different world of working in anime. Characters like Bisky and Hunter x Hunter was so much fun to play, because I love playing tough women, but with a heart of gold, who are really well intentioned, much like Anna and Shaman King. So that's super fun. I'm trying to remember the other show you just mentioned. Hunter x Hunter was
Seven Deadly Sins.
In that show, I got to play young Bond, which is cool because I love, that's an already established character, and we get to see his backstory with him as a child, and it informs his decisions as an adult and who he is. So I love being part of that backstory.
So one of the things that I'm always curious about talking with actors or people that are in the industry, being a publication that talks about mental health, you have such a cornucopia of characters that you've played over the years. But how do you kind of tap into their feelings, their mental health, to kind of reflect the character journey in the shows?
that's when, your acting skills do come into play, but also tapping into your own experiences. While I might not have this experience of being hurt the way they've been hurt, or traumatized or triggered by the things they are, I have my own issues with whatever triggers me. So you just have to use your own stuff and bring it to that character. And then you hope that the work you do resonates with the people who are maybe living that, or maybe the work we do is just a distraction for people who are suffering. And I've heard that a lot. I've heard from a lot of people who, during a very tough time in their life, turned to anime or whatever genre it was because they needed a distraction from the awfulness. And if I can even just provide that, I'm happy to do that. So that's what is nice about working in entertainment. We can either provide insight for people and make them maybe realize things they hadn't realized, or we can just purely be there as a distraction tool.
That's one of the things that I've really liked about entertainment and what our publication and nonprofit do is that you start to realize that you can watch character journeys, whether that be through anime, whether it be through mangas or video games or any other platform, and you can kind of start to articulate and identify with some of the character journeys, or maybe one of the characters that you voiced happened to have been a victim of bullying. That kind of resonates just off as an example. But what's it kind of do for your own mental health to kind of hear stories like that, or just to kind of be a part of someone's healing journey?
I feel humbled and honored that anyone would share their story with me. And through doing these conventions and meeting so many people, I can't believe how open people are to share their stories. And I feel lucky to hear them, and I also I want to be able to respond in the proper way and give them what they need, but sometimes it's just that they need to talk. So I am happy to be here to listen. And sometimes they just need to say, I hear a lot, my parents got divorced when I was this old, and this is what I watched to get me through it. So they associate a certain voice or a certain show with something. And just to be even a cog in that wheel of whatever their journey is an honor. And it's certainly not lost on me. And I understand that, I go to work and sometimes my job feels silly and I'm talking funny and all that, but it's going out into the world and is doing something else for these people. And I am so grateful that I get to meet them. I met a woman recently who had, I don't want to share her story, but just every awful thing happened to them. And she was excited to meet me, and I was more excited to meet her. I was like, you survived and are thriving through your, so I'm just as excited to meet these people. These are people I would never I travel the world and get to meet interesting, triumphant people who are doing incredible things and just happen to be fans of some shows I worked on. So I just feel so lucky to meet the people I meet. We all have our own struggles, and I'm not necessarily as open about sharing them. So I am so impressed when people are that open and do share their stories with me. I think it's very brave and very commendable.
One of the things that you brought up earlier is like something like voicing a Pokemon. You say only a couple lines and you don't really understand how that's gonna kind of play into the larger narrative. And so getting to meet people at conventions like this, just getting to see a little bit of their own shortened version, playing in your work, playing into their larger, grander narrative, I think is, like you said, it's got to be a really rewarding thing for you, in terms of just kind of reminding yourself, do you ever have days where you just it's hard?
Of course. And I have my outlets. I have my silly things, not silly things, but I tend to go towards comedy. If I want to listen, if I am upset about something, I will put on a funny show, or I have my ways of coping and dealing and friends I talk to and all of that. We all have our methods of dealing. And so while it wasn't Pokemon for me, I didn't turn on Pokemon because I was already working on the show. I know that I have those shows in my life. So I can easily relate to them because I get what it's like to have this thing that's your savior, and that's, your escape, really. Entertainment is often an escape. But also it's a learning tool. I meet a lot of kids who grew up watching Pokemon, and the Richie arc there's a lot of noise going on right now. Let's hold while this happens. I meet a lot of kids who watched the Richie Ash rivalry arc, frenemies and all that. And that was the first time they cried watching a show. And I thought, oh my gosh, how cool to be part of this. How cool to be part of, it's a lot of noise, sorry. Oh boy, a lot of, to be part of their emotional journey, learning. I mean, that's a big deal, learning for a kid to cry at a TV show and understand that, like, Ash lost or whatever it was, and this emotional awakening in kids that they got to experience. But also, sometimes I have to play the bully. Sometimes I have to play the mean guy, and I leave those sessions feeling icky because I get what that's like to be tormented by a bully. But someone has to play that role, and while they're really fun, it's really fun to be mean and evil, playing a character. I kind of cringe after I say the lines because I can't. There's a new Harry Potter game, and I play the meanest girl ever, and. But it's not about her. It's really about what the protagonist character does to overcome the bully. So I get that I'm there to serve a purpose.
So my last question being, we've talked about like the importance of like entertainment in terms of like coping and like what would you say to someone listening to this right now that might be struggling or that might like be on the verge of like heavy depression or anxiety or just may not even want to be with us anymore?
I have friends that I've lost to suicide, and I wish they knew how much they were loved and how many resources are available, and free resources. You don't need to have money to get the resources you need. It's an easy Google search. There are people who love you when you don't even know it. There are people, good people, that want to help and will talk you through these things. You are loved, you are wanted, you are needed. We are here for a reason, and whatever you need to do to get through the toughest times, you look out for you, and we want you here. You are oh my gosh, sorry, it's so loud that kind of undermines the deepness of what we're talking about. But I wish I could go back and remind the friends I've lost, without getting emotional, but how much they were loved. And again, I don't understand her suffering. I don't understand that specifically. But I wish I had the words and the vocabulary to use to tell people why they're needed here and loved here, and to please, there's no shame in getting the help you need. There is no shame in that.
Well, you actually, I know I said this would be the last question, but you said something about it earlier, and I just want to like harken back on it. Be like, sometimes literally listening to somebody is like the greatest joy that you can give them, because people just want to be heard and they just want to be validated. And it sounds like even like hearing stories here at conventions, like you're stepping and like partnering with that.
I often feel like a therapist / bartender at these events, because I can tell that someone's bottled up this story. They've probably practiced this story in their head that they're going to tell me, and all I have to do is listen. It's not about what I say to them. It's not about my response. They need to say it. And I am here as a representative of the show. I did not write the show, but they need to say it. And it's all about listening. And hopefully I do that. And hopefully I've done an okay job of that when I've met these people. And hopefully anyone who is suffering just has someone to listen to them. And that is, again, why these helplines are so effective. And because I know that there are sometimes, an hour gap where someone might do something awful, and if in that 1 hour time period someone just listened, what they're about to do could be avoided. So I just need everyone to know that there are resources available for them.
Absolutely. And the last question I want to ask you is, where can people find you online and kind of join your shenanigans?
My shenanigans can be found on all social media. Stuff is at Tara Sands VO. It's pretty basic. Yeah, I'm on all the major whatevers.
All right. Well, I thank you so much for taking time out of your convention schedule today to talk to me about mental health and animation. It was a true pleasure.
Thank you for what you do.